Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're peeling back the layers on this massive, sudden pushback against U.S. artificial intelligence data centers. We want to see who's really pulling the strings here. You know, if you've been following the local news lately, literally anywhere in the country, you've probably noticed a massive surge in protests against tech infrastructure. Well, today, we're diving deep into the data and the dark money behind these movements.
Okay, let's jump right in with a super specific question. Is this sudden, highly coordinated outrage we're seeing at local town halls truly organic, or are we witnessing a highly orchestrated geopolitical operation? According to a massive new report from the Bitcoin Policy Institute, what looks like spontaneous, grassroots frustration is actually part of a massive, multi-year influence campaign. Just look at how rapidly public support has absolutely cratered. Support for data centers dropped from 69% in 2023 down to just 35% in 2026. And get this, that's in Virginia, the state that hosts the largest concentration of data centers in the entire world. And it mirrors a broader nationwide trend, right? A staggering 71% of Americans now oppose local data center construction. Now, before we go any further, we absolutely have to acknowledge that citizens have very real, highly valid concerns. I mean, we're seeing crazy stories, like an artisanal brewery in New York experiencing a 133% electricity price spike in a single month. There are genuine, important debates to be had about water usage out in the arid West and the strain on our aging electrical grids, but the data shows that these valid local concerns, they're being completely co-opted and weaponized. To understand exactly how these local grievances are being weaponized, we're going to follow the money. We'll look at a manufactured consensus, the three distinct influence vectors, inside the Singum Network, foreign billionaire dark money, the geopolitical AI race, and finally, how you can spot the influence yourself. So let's get into Section 1, a manufactured consensus and how the AI debate is being astroturfed. 54. That is the staggering number of local data center moratoriums that have already passed in U.S. towns and counties. 54. And look, the ultimate goal of any campaign targeting infrastructure is legislative paralysis. By grinding things down town by town, county by county, this campaign is achieving a massive, deliberate slowdown of the U.S. AI build-out. And it's wild when you see how this consensus is actually formed. You've got official statements from Chinese state media running completely parallel to publications from supposedly independent U.S. nonprofits. They're using identical talking points, sometimes literally quoting each other verbatim, to drive an anti-American AI narrative. It operates as this perfectly synchronized echo chamber, just seamlessly laundering state propaganda right into domestic activism. All right, Section 2, the three influence vectors. Let's unpack this network. Breaking this network down, we essentially see three specific players. First, you have foreign state media directly targeting American citizens. Second, you've got a network of domestic nonprofits mobilizing the local protests. And third, foreign billionaires providing the dark money to fund the legal and legislative push. It's an intellectual layer, a deployment layer, and a funding layer, all working together in absolute perfect alignment. To see how direct that first vector is, just consider this. When Russian and Iranian state media suddenly develop a deep, passionate concern for local zoning laws in rural Maine or Oklahoma, yeah, that's a massive red flag. They are actively trying to mobilize very specific regional U.S. constituencies against our national infrastructure interests. Now for Section 3, inside the Singum Network, exploring the CCP-aligned ecosystem. This deployment pipeline is fascinating. It starts with Neville Roy Singum, an American expat living in Shanghai, who has funneled an estimated $278 million into U.S. nonprofits. The network uses Tricontinental as a think tank to write the academic justifications. Then, the People's Forum trains the activists. Breakthrough News amplifies the message online, and groups like CodePink and the Answer Coalition physically disrupt the streets and block construction sites. These groups share funds, they share office space, and they run a highly repeatable system to paralyze American infrastructure on demand. For example, CodePink recently targeted specific U.S. metadata center projects in Louisiana and Wyoming. But here's the catch. They didn't just frame it as an environmental issue. They explicitly framed it as fighting, quote, the new Cold War on China. By linking local environmental concerns directly to a geopolitical agenda favoring the PRC, they are seamlessly laundering foreign policy goals right through local American activism. Which brings us to Section 4, foreign billionaire dark money. We need to follow the funding. Because mobilizing protests and lobbying for federal legislation requires a mountain of cash.
Try over $2 billion. $2 billion. That is the amount funneled by foreign-tied charitable vehicles into U.S. advocacy infrastructure. Specifically, funds tied to Swiss billionaire Hans-Georg Wyss and British billionaire Alan Parker's Oak Foundation have moved astronomical sums into the exact nonprofit groups driving these anti-data center campaigns. Following the timeline really reveals how this dark money transforms into legislative action. On December 8, 2025, a coalition of organizations, many funded by this exact foreign billionaire money, signed a letter demanding a national moratorium on AI data centers. Just 107 days later, the Sanders-Ocasio-Cortez AI Data Center Moratorium Act was introduced in Congress. Shortly after that, Senator Sanders hosted a Capitol panel on AI featuring 2 veteran Chinese government affiliates. I mean, moving from a dark money-funded letter to federal legislation in just 107 days, that is the absolute hallmark of a highly coordinated influence operation, not spontaneous grassroots outrage.
Moving on to Section 5, the geopolitical AI race and the strategy of asymmetry.
To really understand why these international actors are targeting American infrastructure, the Bitcoin Policy Institute points to a stark geopolitical asymmetry. Look at this clear narrative contrast. On one hand, Beijing's English-language state media is blanketing the U.S. with messaging that data centers are dangerous, environmentally catastrophic, and economically ruinous. But back home in China, the Chinese state is actively subsidizing up to 50% of the energy costs for their own domestic AI data centers. They're pulling out all the stops to ensure they win the global tech race.
According to researchers, the strategic goal of this smear operation is actually shockingly simple: to induce voluntary restraint in the United States. If they can get American communities to freeze their own scaling and paralyze their own infrastructure through endless zoning fights, well, rival nations can just accelerate completely unchecked.
Finally, Section 6, spotting the influence and arming the viewer. So what should you actually take away from this? How you, the voter, the local citizen, spot this manufactured consensus if it shows up at your own town hall. You need to watch out for the deployment of identical grassroots toolkits. Crucially, keep a close eye out for the Media Justice Toolkit titled The People Say No, Resisting Data Centers. If you're at a local zoning meeting and you hear activists quoting verbatim from The People Say No, you are not witnessing organic local pushback. You are seeing the localized deployment of a highly organized, foreign-funded playbook designed to stop American infrastructure in its tracks.
Here's exactly how you can protect your community's debate. Number 1, never dismiss valid local concerns about utility bills or water. Those are real. But number 2, loudly demand absolute funding transparency from the activist groups showing up to protest. Number 3, check if those groups have overlapping affiliations with the Singum Network or the dark money funds we just talked about. And finally, number 4, work to separate genuine local deliberation from intentional geopolitical sabotage.
Ultimately, transparency is our only real defense. We absolutely must ensure that our vital local infrastructure decisions aren't being covertly subverted by international actors who are just using dark money and proxy nonprofits to weaponize our own democratic processes against us.
I want to leave you with this final thought to consider the very next time you see a supposedly local, spontaneous protest against American tech invasion. If our most crucial infrastructure debates are actually being covertly written in Beijing and Geneva, who really controls America's technological future? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those tough questions, keep demanding transparency, and I'll see you next time.